Hey guys, this is Pablo with Meditation Amsterdam. In today's video, I want to touch on the subject of spiritual ideas or pointers as things that can help us move in the direction of self-realization and can also become hindrances on the path of development, and how to train our minds to use spiritual pointers in a way that is more productive for us. And in order to do this, I want to use a comment that a viewer left a couple of videos ago, in which I was being invited to consider the notion of grace, or the idea of grace. And this viewer defined grace as something that's outside of you and something that is sort of pulling you and teaching you how life should be lived. So I've touched, by the way, on the idea of grace in the past, a few months ago, maybe a year ago or so. And quite frankly, I didn't really review that video to make this one. It's not that important, really. Whatever I thought at the time was whatever I thought at the time, and this might contradict it completely, and I might be making a video in 3 months' time that contradicts that as well. And that's perhaps one of the first things to share about spiritual pointers. Our understanding of what they stand for changes over time. Perhaps it becomes more nuanced, less black and white. And also spiritual notions that help us in early days become a hindrance later on. So, in this game of self-cultivation and self-realization, the notion of conceptual consistency is, I would say, highly overrated. It's in fact a marker that your neuroplasticity, or your capacity to change your mind and deal with paradox, is not very well developed. I would say, and maybe I digress a little bit, but in general, if this path looks like a linear upward curve, something is a bit off, right? Consistent linear improvement would be to me a telltale sign that sincerity is somewhat amiss, right? This is more of a sort of windy, organic, one step forward, two steps back type of thing, and trying to figure things out. Now, grace is a great example of spiritual pointers which can be both helpful and a hindrance. It has many disadvantages that I could voice, and which have made me, perhaps in the past, and maybe even up until that comment this week, a bit reluctant to use it too much or subscribe to it too much. For one thing, it's a concept, right? Or an idea, a notion. And it is not confirmed by my current experience, right? So already there, we stand at the risk of going into the territory of belief as opposed to the territory of direct experience. Now, there is a place for belief, or for entertaining ideas, especially ideas contained in spiritual classic books, or books that try to guide us, or people who are trying to guide us. So we are almost a bit forced to take things at face value. But if we are in the stage at which we are starting to touch into direct experience, and things are becoming a little bit non-dual, we are doing our shadow work and so on, then reverting back to the stage of ideas and concepts could potentially be a hindrance. There's a high risk of that. There's another element, which is the element of concepts that are that have a spiritual or religious undertone, which grace clearly does. And they, I think we stand the risk of exercising belief as the main mode of using our mind, and belief can be a tricky thing, right? But belief can land us in the territory of using ideas as a crutch to make up for experience that has not really arisen yet. The positive things that I could say about grace. Oh, and I'll say one last negative one, which is that this notion that there's a force outside of us, for people who are especially in the early phases of the path, everything that places the locus of control outside of you, as opposed to inviting you to make the effort of doing the practices, could potentially also be a hindrance. All of that said, and these are the very things that have made me reluctant to adopt grace as a notion in the past, are dwarfed, I would say, by the potential benefits of entertaining grace as a notion or as a pointer. The main one of which to me would be that if we entertain, even if temporarily, the feel of something outside of us which is trying to make contact, and by feel, I'm being very specific here. I'm not saying believe in grace, but rather if we ask ourselves, how would it feel if something foreign was trying to indeed guide me and make contact with me? It can do something quite remarkable in placing our minds in a receptive state of mind. And I tried it, and actually the results are pretty impressive. Because as it happens, there are parts of our mind that are indeed trying to make contact with the conscious part of the mind. Now, whether we call that grace or not, I will speak to that in a moment. But I decided to try it on. Let's call it like that. I decided to ask the question, okay, let's for a moment feel into the notion that grace is a real thing, and what that does is quite impressive. So you could try that vehicle, right? You could try that on, and you could even try the devotional path in which you surrender to that otherness and let it take you over. You'll enter non-dual territory very, very quickly if you do that correctly, and if your mind is sort of geared in that direction. Once again, a pointer can hinder you if used too conceptually, if it is taken as having value in and of itself, as opposed to pointing towards an experience, right, or pointing towards direct experience. And if it makes the mind adopt the mode of believing in something that is, let's say, beyond your experiential pay grade. So those are the things to consider. Now, how to deal with this, right? How to navigate the correct use of spiritual concepts then. And I would say that the main distinction that we want to make for ourselves when using spiritual pointers is to ask whether we are using the pointer for its for the value of the information that it provides, or by the way, because these are not exclusive, are we using it for emotional reassurance and for subscribing to a picture of how reality works, which is kind of created through words or aided by words. So information and reassurance. I'm perhaps simplifying, but those are the two ways that we could use spiritual notions. they can happen at the same time. I noticed myself a few months ago being very annoyed at being challenged about embodiment, because I know for a fact that embodiment is one of the pillars for self-cultivation. I still haven't changed my mind about that, by the way. I still believe that embodiment is one of those really, one of those silver bullets. But at the same time, I was using it as a positionality. I was finding emotional and mental reassurance in the idea of embodiment, you see? So we want to watch out for how we use these. Ways to figure out if this is the case or not. Try, like you're trying on different hats, try it on and off. If you have an idea that you've really subscribed to, or that you are really reluctant to subscribe to or to entertain for experimental purposes, see what it feels like if you do entertain it, right? Does something feel threatened, or does something feel uncomfortable? Then you know that you have emotionality riding on rejecting that concept. And the other way around, if you try it off, if you switch off your belief in grace in this case, and that feels uncomfortable, like it needs to be protected, then maybe there are some emotions there that are hiding behind that entire notion, and they need to be dismantled at some point so that we don't fall into positionality in the mind. So trying things on and off. Another interesting technique to use, or mental little tactic, would be to see what it is that grace is pointing at, and see if we can get there by describing it with a different paradigm. So I did at the start of the video where I said, well, maybe it's not grace, maybe it's not another, maybe it's not anything holy or divine. Maybe there are parts of our nervous system, such as the enteric brain, which sits in the gut, which is sending signals, and has been sending signals for quite a while, to our conscious mind, or our thinking mind, which is up here in the brain. And it feels foreign because it's just not recognized until we do the cultivation, and it's trying to make contact. And yes, indeed, it's trying to teach us how to live, but it's a perfectly explainable neurological phenomenon. Now, if you find yourself subscribing to grace and you find this explanation insulting or offensive or whatever, maybe that's something there being pointed at, right? Emotion is a great, or emotional valence, right? Emotional relevance is a great telltale sign that we are subscribing to a certain positionality or a certain concept, and we have there's something riding on it. Let's put it like that. So trying it on and off is something to try out. Trying to understand and be versatile in the paradigms, in the different paradigms that can get us to the same result, is also a great one. It's great for neuroplasticity, is great for connecting with others. Some people are a little bit more logical, other people work great in metaphors or visualizations or whatever. And if we become versatile, then we become able to connect better, and we are also much better to reach synthesis of ideas, as opposed to just being like ships that pass each other in the night, because we can't really connect with different paradigms, and we are emotionally invested in a certain paradigm that explains things. So that's another interesting one. And the other thing to consider is, just like pretending that something is the case when we don't have the experience about it yet. That's one trap, let's say. We go around talking, for example, about non-duality, but never having had the taste for it. Like, that can be a hindrance. To talk beyond your spiritual pay grade, let's call it like that. The opposite side of that coin can also be a hindrance. To keep talking about it once the experience has been had can equally be a hindrance, because there's really no point in using concepts when the direct experience has become available, right? Other than to communicate, of course. but it no longer needs to be used. And hence the title of this video. I haven't watched the movie Dumbo for a very, very long time, but as far as I do remember, he finds this feather. Now he has these big ears, which he can fly. He's an elephant that can fly. But he doesn't believe it, so he has this magical feather, supposedly magical feather, and through the feather he believes that he can fly, right? But it's not the feather that's doing the trick. He could fly all along. Now, concepts can become that, right? They can become a reassurance when in fact we already have it in us. And in general, I would say that the use of spiritual pointers is actually a very, it's a skill, right? It's something to be learned. Do we have something emotionally caught up in the concept? Are we simply talking about it but not quite looking at what it points to? Or are we using it beyond its usefulness? Somebody used once the analogy of religion being a revolving door. You only need to go through it once as opposed to continuously spinning on it, and spiritual pointers are precisely that as well. So those are the kind of considerations to take when we use spiritual pointers. Some of the tactics also that we can use to challenge ourselves and see if we are falling into emotional or mental positionality for the sake of reassurance. And you know, specifically about the notion of grace, which is, I think, a great example of a spiritual pointer. Some of the dangers that spiritual pointers carry because of their religious undertones and things of that kind, which can create a problematic situation in our mind if we don't know how to use them correctly. Yep, that's the thought for today. Actually, I wanted to share that one. I thought it was a relevant thing because it sparked also. I noticed sparking resistance in my mind, and I thought I'd use it as a vehicle to discover a little bit what it was about. Turns out grace is quite a cool thing if you use it properly, or if you entertain it in the right way. But it can also be a great hindrance, right? So curious what you guys make of this one. Do share it in the comment section if you think it's interesting, or if you can relate or agree, disagree. And I'll be back with more videos pretty soon. Liking, sharing, subscribing, always welcome, and see you in the next video. Cheerio. Bye-bye.